What if the celebration of a new year, a night meant for joy, suddenly became the backdrop for unspeakable violence? December 31st, 2024, Bourbon Street, New Orleans. It's New Year's Eve. The energy is electric, the air filled with laughter, music, and the promise of a fresh start. People from all walks of life are celebrating, their smiles illuminated by fireworks in the sky. But what happens when that celebration is shattered by a moment of unimaginable violence that descends into chaos, death, and destruction? On a night meant for hope, 14 people lost their lives and dozens more were left shattered. A horrific attack unfolds in the heart of one of the most famous streets in America. And in the aftermath, the world is left with one burning question. How did it happen? Who could commit such a thing? This wasn't just any random act of violence. It was meticulously planned. It was executed with chilling precision. And yet, when the identity of the perpetrator is revealed, the answer seems unfathomable. Someone who served in combat zones, someone who was once celebrated for his dedication to the country. Now, this same person becomes the mastermind of one of the deadliest attacks in modern history. But the question remains, how did he go from a soldier defending freedom to someone who would wage a war against his own people? The pieces of the puzzle don't fit, the motivations are unclear, and the more we dig, the more unsettling the answers become. This is the story of Shamsud-Din Jabbar, the New Orleans tragedy he unleashed, and the terrifying events that led up to it. A story that forces us to confront questions we aren't sure we're ready to answer. How did a decorated Army veteran, someone who had sworn to protect, become the mastermind behind one of the deadliest attacks in U.S. history? What happened to him that led to a cold, calculated moment of terror? Was this attack inevitable, or were there signs that we missed, signs that, if caught in time, could have saved lives? As we take you through the chilling details, one thing becomes certain. This story doesn't just shake the foundation of one city. It shakes the very fabric of what we believe about terrorism, radicalization, and the people we trust. Stay with us, because the answers you're about to hear will change the way you think about security, the military, and the quiet dangers hiding in plain sight. Before we continue, there is a need for a disclaimer. This video blends factual details with dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. While inspired by real events and supported by publicly available information, some aspects have been enhanced or imagined to provide a compelling narrative. Names and images may have been changed for privacy or legal reasons, and certain facts may differ from official reports. This is not an official investigation, and we are not affiliated with any investigative bodies. The content is intended to inform and entertain, and we do not condone or promote violence in any form. Viewer discretion is advised. Shamsud-Din Jabbar was born in Houston, Texas. From the outside, his childhood seemed ordinary. Like many others, he grew up in a home filled with modest means and the quiet rhythms of daily life. But what lay beneath the surface was a restless, driven spirit. Raised in a neighborhood where crime was common, Jabbar always felt an unspoken tension between his ambition and the challenges that came with it. His childhood wasn't easy, strained relationships with family and a deep sense of wanting to escape. That drive led him to the U.S. Army, where he quickly found a sense of purpose, discipline, and pride in serving his country. Jabbar wasn't a soldier who sought the front lines, but his role in human resources and IT helped the Army in ways that made him invaluable. His tech skills were seen as cutting edge. He earned commendations for his service during deployments to Afghanistan. He was respected by his peers, a quiet man who didn't boast about his achievements, but quietly earned the respect of those around him. His time in Afghanistan would shape him in ways he couldn't predict, seeing firsthand the effects of conflict on both soldiers and civilians. Still, Jabbar remained emotionally distant, preferring to keep his personal life and feelings locked away. After leaving the military, Jabbar transitioned into civilian life. The skills he had honed in the Army landed him a corporate consulting job at Deloitte. For many, this would have been the start of a new chapter, a successful career, stability, and the chance to put down roots. But for Jabbar, this wasn't enough. The corporate world, with its sharp focus on efficiency and results, left him feeling alienated. Despite his professional success, He was never truly comfortable in this new world. As Jabbar settled into civilian life, the cracks began to show. The world he had left behind in the military felt distant, yet his memories of war and the emotional scars it left behind were always with him. His marriages had fallen apart twice. Divorce after divorce, Jabbar found himself isolated, struggling to hold on to any sense of connection. The emotional toll of his experiences, combined with financial instability, led him into a downward spiral. His life, once so tightly controlled and focused, had unraveled. His job at Deloitte, while prestigious, couldn't fill the void he felt inside. Alone and broken, Jabbar found himself retreating further from the world around him. Late nights alone became an increasingly common occurrence. The deep mental health challenges of depression and PTSD that he had buried for so long finally emerged from the shadows. Though Jabbar kept his struggles mostly to himself, those who knew him said they could see the subtle shifts. The once driven man seemed withdrawn, no longer interested in the camaraderie of his peers or the work that had once energized him. His personal demons, unspoken and deeply ingrained, began to consume him. But it wasn't just his personal life that began to change. Jabbar started engaging with new influences. At first, it was small signs, easy to overlook. Jabbar, in the privacy of his home, started following pages online that discussed extremist views. He immersed himself in online forums where like-minded individuals shared their discontent with Western values, their hatred for America's role in global conflicts. He began to watch propaganda videos, each one more radical than the last. His mind, already fractured by personal loss and emotional trauma, became fertile ground for dangerous ideas. Jabbar's search for meaning led him down darker paths. As he consumed more extremist content, his views became more radical. His social media activity began to reflect his growing anger, posts about U.S. foreign policy, his disillusionment with the military, and, increasingly, expressions of allegiance to ISIS. He felt like an outsider in a world that had failed him, and he saw the radicalized group as the only one that understood his anger. But it wasn't just ideology that took root. It was the sense of belonging. In a community that offered purpose and structure, Jabbar saw a chance to feel like he mattered again. He didn't just sympathize with the cause. He became an active supporter, sharing extremist rhetoric online and connecting with others who felt the same way. His posts weren't merely theoretical. They were a declaration of intent. Experts in radicalization point to this exact phenomenon, how individuals, especially veterans like Jabbar, often seek validation for their trauma and pain. And when they find that validation in the form of extremist ideologies, it can push them to act in violent, destructive ways. Jabbar had always been someone who followed orders, but now he was becoming someone who would write his own. By late 2024, Jabbar had crossed a point of no return. His radicalization was complete, and the attack was no longer just a thought, it was an inevitability. The authorities, though aware of his growing presence online, had yet to make the connection. But Jabbar had already made his choice. The plan was set in motion. But how did a man who once served his country with pride become someone who could plan to unleash such terror on the streets he once swore to protect? What invisible forces were at play in his mind that led to the decision to destroy so many innocent lives? And how often do we pause to ask ourselves, have we become someone our past selves would no longer recognize? What life events or unseen struggles shape us into the people we are today? Could something in our own history, something buried deep, be leading us down a path we never imagined? As the hours ticked down to midnight, Bourbon Street was alive. The crowds, oblivious to the danger closing in, continued their celebrations. Music filled the air, laughter echoed through the streets, fireworks lit up the sky. But in the midst of the excitement, one man walked among them with an entirely different purpose. Surveillance footage shows Jabbar, a figure blending in with the revelers, moving with deliberate intention through the bustling street. He walks with calm but unwavering resolve. At first glance, he seems like any other face in the crowd, but there's something chilling about the way he glances around. The moments before the attack hold the key to understanding the planning and cold calculation behind it. Around 11:45 p.m., Jabbar is seen walking along the perimeter of Bourbon Street. He pauses at intersections, his gaze fixed, surveying his surroundings. He's not looking for a good place to watch the fireworks. He's looking for the perfect moment to strike. Witnesses later recall how he seemed detached from the energy of the crowd, a stark contrast to the jubilant atmosphere around him. At 11:52 p.m., he crosses paths with several partygoers, laughing and chatting in the street. They have no idea what's about to happen. One witness describes the fleeting interaction. He passed by me, didn't even look my way. It was like he was somewhere else, mentally, like he was in another world altogether. Jabbar then disappears briefly from view, his presence momentarily lost in the sea of people. But he reappears on camera at 11:56 p.m., standing still on the sidewalk. His eyes scan the crowd once more, this time with a sense of finality. And then at precisely midnight, the moment he's been waiting for arrives. The crowd erupts in celebration, the perfect cover for the attack he's about to initiate. It's chilling to watch the footage frame by frame, seeing a man so coldly calculate his next move, while the world around him is caught in the rapture of the New Year's celebrations. But why? What was going through his mind at this moment? Was it the culmination of years of radicalization, a desire for vengeance, or something even more personal, something that had been building for far longer? At 12 a.m., a sudden explosion of chaos. The sound of screeching tires filled the air, instantly cutting through the cheers of the crowd. For a split second, no one understood what had just happened. Then, screams, panic, people scattered trying to escape the chaos. It took mere seconds for Jabbar to accelerate the vehicle toward the crowd. It was as if time itself had slowed down in those precious moments. Witnesses later described hearing the truck rev its engine as it barreled down Bourbon Street. One man recalls, "It was like a freight train coming for us. People didn't have time to react. There was no place to run." Jabbar's vehicle struck the heart of the crowd with brutal force. The truck tore through revelers, plowing into the mass of bodies, some of them thrown several feet away. The sound of the impact was deafening. People shouted in terror as they scrambled to help their fallen friends and loved ones. Amidst the chaos, Jabbar remained composed, driving methodically, his intent clear, to inflict as much harm as possible. The scene was surreal. A night meant for joy, for celebration, had become a nightmare in seconds. Emergency services scrambled to the scene, arriving within minutes. But it was already too late. The damage was done. Jabbar's vehicle had already come to a halt at the edge of the crowd, and as police closed in, he took his own life. No one had seen it coming. In the aftermath, the streets were littered with broken lives, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Emergency responders worked tirelessly, but the question lingered in the air. How could this have happened? How could a man once honored for his service become the agent of such devastation? What drives someone from serving their country to targeting its citizens? What is it in the human mind, in the psyche, that can turn a protector into an aggressor? And can we truly understand the forces of fate that can lead a man to this moment? I'm reminded of the Bible verse in Romans 9, verse 9, 15-16. St. Paul quotes the Lord as recorded in Exodus 33:19 and paraphrases, "I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion." This verse refers to the all-knowing God, who alone knows who will ultimately attain salvation, and who, tragically, may be doomed from the very beginning. There are pharaohs whose hearts harden even in the presence of the Lord, and there are Sauls who repent and transform after encountering him. As to which category Shamsud-Din belonged to, we will never know on this side of eternity. But one thing is certain, the desire for salvation guarantees it. And, not knowing where Shamsud-Din's soul lies, we have a duty to pray for him, that the Lord in his infinite mercy forgive him for the sins he committed that cost 14 people their lives, that the souls of the victims and the soul of the perpetrator may find rest and peace in the arms of the one who holds eternity. The investigation begins with a chaotic scene left in the aftermath of the attack. Authorities sift through the wreckage to piece together what happened. The discovery of the pickup truck, a rental vehicle, quickly becomes a key turning point. Investigators trace the vehicle back to Jabbar using meticulous records from the rental agency. This link is solidified when surveillance footage from the area matches Jabbar to the truck hours before the attack. Eyewitness testimonies from Bourbon Street further narrow the focus. Several bystanders recall seeing Jabbar pacing in the hours leading up to the attack, wearing a calm yet unsettling expression. These testimonies add a layer of unease to the already perplexing profile of the perpetrator. The investigation team cross-references surveillance footage from neighboring streets, gradually reconstructing Jabbar's movements. Each step reveals a premeditated plan, executed with chilling precision. The search of Jabbar's home unveils a disturbing trove of evidence. Inside, investigators find a makeshift bomb-making station, a chilling indication of the attack's potential scale if other plans had materialized. Schematics, chemical compounds, and half-assembled devices paint the picture of someone methodical and intent on destruction. Among the personal effects is an open Quran, displaying passages Jabbar had annotated. Experts later point out how such texts, removed from context, are often manipulated to justify acts of violence. This discovery raises questions about how ideology can be twisted to serve destructive ends. Online, authorities uncovered Jabbar's digital footprint, a series of manifesto-like posts pledging allegiance to ISIS and videos where he calls for violent action. These postings, coupled with private messages, provide insight into Jabbar's radicalization journey. The evidence suggests a deeply troubled individual seeking meaning in a warped worldview. Experts weigh in on the red flags that might have been missed. Psychologists and counterterrorism specialists discuss how Jabbar's isolation post-military service made him vulnerable to radicalization. They highlight systemic challenges, the difficulty in identifying lone wolf threats, and the limitations of monitoring individuals who exhibit subtle signs of extremism. Questions arise about whether interventions, mental health support, community engagement, or more robust vetting in online spaces could have prevented this tragedy. This segment delves into the broader implications of the attack. What does it say about the intersection of mental health, ideology, and violence? How does society balance the need for vigilance with respect for individual freedoms? Could intervention have changed the course of this tragedy? And more personally, do we recognize the moments in our lives when someone around us is crying out for help before it's too late? The human toll of the tragedy becomes heartbreakingly clear as the names and stories of the victims emerge. 14 lives were lost, each life uniquely precious, woven with dreams, connections, and futures that now remain unfulfilled in this world. Among them was a young couple celebrating their engagement, filled with joy and hope for a shared future. A father of 3, on a much-needed family vacation, seeking to reconnect with loved ones, and a college student preparing for a life-changing study abroad semester, brimming with anticipation. For their families, the tragedy leaves a void that words cannot fill. Parents recall the last phone calls with their children, holding tightly to those fleeting moments. Spouses mourn dreams of growing old together, now suspended in grief. Siblings recount memories of shared laughter, now shaded by the ache of absence. Survivors of the attack, marked by physical and emotional scars, describe the chaos and helplessness of that night. And yet, amidst the sorrow, the community responds with a depth of love that speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. Memorials emerge along Bourbon Street, candles flickering against the darkness as if to declare that light still persists. Handwritten notes of condolence and prayer line the streets, each one a small act of defiance against despair. Vigils held in churches, community centers, and public spaces bring people together, uniting them in grief and solidarity. While the questions remain, how could this have happened? What can we do to ensure it never happens again? How do we best comfort those who mourn? There is also space for reflection on a deeper, eternal truth. For Christians, the belief is that the souls of the faithful departed are now at peace, embraced by a God who is rich in mercy. The lives lost here are not lost forever. We trust and pray that they will come to know a joy beyond anything this world could offer, a union with the God of peace, who wipes away every tear. And even for those who may not have explicitly known Christ, but whose hearts sought goodness, truth, and love, we are reminded of a God who looks beyond labels and sees the longing of the human heart. Mercy is not rationed. It is abundant for those who desire salvation and strive for what is right. In our prayers, we entrust these souls to the one who is just and merciful, confident that their journey does not end in darkness but moves toward light. As we grieve, we find hope in this promise. The prayers offered for the victims are not in vain. They carry them closer to the fullness of joy and peace that only God can give. This is not the end of their story, but the beginning of something greater, something eternal. At the same time, the tragedy forces us to confront a harsh reality. Shamsud-Din Jabbar's actions have highlighted systemic gaps in support systems for veterans, the vulnerabilities in counterterrorism efforts, and the challenges of balancing security with civil liberties. His story is a tragic example of how post-traumatic stress, isolation, and the manipulative tactics of extremist ideologies can converge, creating a perfect storm of violence. It is a call to action, not only for national leaders, but for all of us. Have we as a society created an environment where cries for help are ignored until they erupt into screams of violence? Are there moments in our own lives where we have seen pain in others and turned away? What will it take for us to listen, to act, and to offer mercy before it is too late? And in the midst of this reflection, can we also find comfort in the hope that even in the shadow of tragedy, the light of love and redemption continues to shine? For the victims, for the grieving, and even for those lost in their own brokenness, God's mercy beckons us all toward healing, peace, and eternal joy. Shamsud-Din Jabbar's story is one of contradictions, hope and heartbreak, service and destruction, potential and peril. His journey from a decorated soldier to a man capable of orchestrating unspeakable violence forces us to confront unsettling truths. How does a life once devoted to protecting others take such a dark and devastating turn? Was it a series of small, unnoticed shifts? Or were there moments when intervention could have made all the difference? But this tragedy transcends one man's story. It encompasses the 14 precious lives lost that night, the dozens injured, and the countless families and friends left to carry the burden of this event for the rest of their lives. It's about the struggle of a society wrestling with the complexities of radicalization, the obligations we owe to our veterans, and the systems designed to protect individuals and the collective good. Jabbar's choices were undeniably his own, yet they reflect wider challenges. How we address trauma, how we connect with those suffering in silence, and how we balance vigilance with compassion. His story asks us to look inward and to examine the spaces we occupy in our own lives. Are there people we pass by who are quietly slipping through the cracks? More personally, have we become someone our past selves might not recognize? If so, what brought about that transformation? And how do we feel about it? Amid the heartbreak, this story also urges us to seek hope. For those who lost their lives, our faith reminds us that death is not the end. These 14 souls, though taken too soon, can be lifted in prayer to experience peace and joy far beyond what this world can offer. And for those left grieving, perhaps the shared unity in pain and remembrance can sow the seeds of healing and hope. This tragedy challenges us to think deeply about the root causes of radicalization and brokenness in society. It invites us to reflect on how systems, relationships, and choices intertwine to shape the paths people take. But above all, it asks, how can we together address these root causes to prevent future tragedies? We'd love to hear your reflections. What do you believe could have changed Jabbar's trajectory? Are there warning signs society consistently overlooks? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're here to listen. And as we close this chapter, let us consider our roles in building a world where darkness does not prevail, where understanding takes root, and where hope always shines brighter. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we continue to explore true crime stories that push us to question not just the world around us, but also ourselves. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.